My talk today is about what we don't know, because I've come to recognize that is what I don't know that is maybe the most important part of my journey in becoming an artist, in my process as a choreographer, and in forming and running a successful arts organization. I came to dance quite late, a highly impressionable young man who was more than a little lost. Although I had very loving and supportive parents, I was terribly insecure about my Japanese heritage, about being and looking different. I wanted desperately to be something, someone else. What? I didn't know. Just anything but who I was. My first dance experience was in a movement class for actors, actually. Somehow, halfway across a small basement studio, doing a simple hitch step to the beat of a hand drum, I found something about myself that I actually liked, that made sense. That sense quickly became a kind of itch, something I felt I needed to do a lot more of. I just didn't know how. I began my first ballet classes at age 17, already thinking that I would be on stage one day, if I knew then what it would really ask of me. The endless hours of repetition to develop strength and accuracy and endurance. The physical pain of literally changing the alignment of my muscles and joints. The unforgiving steps in learning a technique of dancing. If I knew then, I might not have continued. When I began GroundWorks, I knew I wanted to make dances, and I thought I knew how to produce dance concerts. But I discovered that I knew very little about what it really takes to make those things possible to do with others over time. This was a different kind of commitment, posing new questions and challenges. Internally, the mental discipline of having to show up every day and lead a creative process, and the mental rigor of that process over time. What am I really trying to say? And that rigor that can become self-doubt and self-defeating. Is it good enough? Am I good enough? And externally, how do I build support for my work? Where to begin? Creating something out of nothing. We begin each project coming from darkness, full of uncertainty, with more questions than answers. We often start with very simple ideas. I call them premises, and we develop from there. We take small steps, one step at a time. We began to perform in small, non-traditional venues, churches, galleries, industrial spaces. We learned to do things in specific ways. We treated our limited resources as opportunities. Smaller wasn't just cheaper, it was better, more intimate. We could literally be closer to our audience, and our audiences responded. We did a lot with a little. Our lighting designer once lit beautifully one of our concerts with only 10 lights, because that was all the power we had. We found unexpected value. We found new audiences in new surroundings. We created a context for discovering new work in places of architectural or historical significance and called it our Landmark series, which became part of our identity. Small steps, not small ideas. Learning what we could do well, who we were becoming. In our creative process, we become curious about something. And then we become obsessed with it. It gets worked and reworked and taken apart and examined and tried on again and again and again and then again until something about it takes on a life of its own. We stop thinking about the connections and we start to simply feel them. We kept developing this idea of smaller scale as an asset, something that could be more personal, more accessible. It allowed us to pay closer attention to details. We valued the quality and intimacy of our exchanges, and we started to apply that to everything we did, from how we produced our dance concerts, to how we worked with students in our education programs, to how we conducted our fundraising. As dancers, we work to perfect our technique and our craft, the execution of what we perform. Dancers are amazingly attuned to the finest details of their body. You need to cultivate this kind of self-awareness, this self-focus and self-reliance in order to perform. But as a choreographer and director, nobody told me that I didn't have to try to do everything myself. It took me a while to realize that I didn't need to be the source for all the good ideas in the room. I think I realized my self-reliance had limitations sometime as I was being admitted to hospital, exhausted, in severe abdominal pain from stress. Oh, but still thinking about the guest list for the concert we were producing that evening, and worrying about a grand deadline that was due the next day, and not to mention who was going to perform for me that evening. But it hit me. I really didn't know how to ask for help, how to rely on others. We find ways to exchange information. We borrow from each other. Like a question, we offer an arm, and we reply using another arm. We go through one idea, we go under another, we react to a push with a pull, and we discover how one action can trigger another action. We allow that combined knowledge to accumulate. I did get some help. We hired a general manager, and we began to boost our administrative capacity. As the company has grown, we've started to expand our relationship to our community. We've developed new partnerships with individuals and organizations that have helped us share resources and spurred new opportunities. We've invited nationally and internationally renowned guest artists to collaborate with us to create new work, and we've brought that work to audiences throughout the region. I've begun to learn from individuals, leaders in the business and philanthropic and arts community who teach by example how to work with others, how to be generous, how to develop trust. We stop thinking as separate entities and start thinking as one idea. We started to see ourselves a little differently, to ask other questions. What are the ways that people can connect with what we do? Is it solely through seeing GroundWorks in performance, or are there other ways for people to experience the company? How can we create an exchange of ideas that isn't just coming from us, but is shared by others? And as performing artists, will it change our relationship to our community? What is not knowing? Throughout my career as a dancer, as a choreographer, as director of a company, it is what I didn't know that led me to something new. One of my first ballet teachers once told me I was the most crooked thing he'd ever seen walk into a dance studio. But I came back the next day, and the day after, and that turned into the next 35 years. Not knowing is being in a studio each day with a group of dancers and finding new ways to create something together. Not knowing is discarding most of what you made yesterday and starting over. It's about starting with just the thread of an idea and investing the time and the effort for it to lead to something worthwhile. It's about allowing others to contribute in ways that you can't, to create something different than you ever imagined. It's also what we don't know about others. The anonymous check, the volunteer who's last to leave, the woman who brings 3 of her friends to your concert. Not knowing is only 30 people in the audience and a standing ovation. And as for that ballet teacher, he worked patiently with me to teach me the basics. He ignored me when I was about to quit. He gave me classes when I couldn't pay him. And eventually, he offered me my first job. We can never know where our choices will take us, what will work out, who we will be most influenced by, how it will affect us. But I believe the art of not knowing is first about starting, not letting what you don't know prevent you from beginning. It's becoming curious and then fiercely persistent. And finally, and maybe most importantly, but simply, it's about believing. Believing in yourself and then believing in others, which is the starting place for everything that is possible.